As Biden has begun to announce his new cabinet, two major progressive groups, the Sunrise Movement and Justice Democrats, are pushing for more liberal representation, namely Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in the cabinet.
So when CNN asked Senator Sanders if he would accept the role of labor secretary, here's what he had to say.
Let me ask you about these reports, and I'm sure you've seen them, that potentially you might be eyeing a position in President-elect Biden's cabinet, labor secretary, for example. Is that true?
Well, what's true is I want to do everything I can to protect the working families of this country who are under tremendous duress right now. And whether that's in the Senate, whether that's in the Biden administration, who knows? Well, let's see how that unfolds.
But if he asked you to join the cabinet as labor secretary, would you say yes?
If I had a portfolio that allowed me to stand up and fight for working families, would I do it? Yes, I would.
All right, Senator Sanders, maybe I'll call you Mr. Secretary one of these days. Thanks so much for joining us.
We are back with former senior advisor for the Sanders campaign, president and founder of Solidarity Strategies, and author of T.O. Bernie, Chuck Rocha. And we also have co-host of the Realignment podcast, the one and only Marshall Kosloff, joins us to discuss. Great to see you guys.
Good to see you guys.
All right, Chuck, I got to start with you on this one. First of all, what do you make of, it's been reported that Senator Sanders has been essentially advocating to be labor secretary. What do you think of that move? And do you think that there's any chance that Biden has that in mind for him?
I do think there's a chance, and there may not be a more qualified individual in the entire nation to have this job. And I'm not just saying that because I love Bernie, because I wrote a book about Bernie, because I worked for Bernie. People are going to say Chuck's just a Bernie hack. He's trying to get his boss. No. I go back on this a long ways. I was the last rank and file union member to actually become a national officer of a union. I've negotiated contracts. I've been with Bernie Sanders since he was a congressman from Vermont. And lock, stock, every step of his way, he's always stood with workers, always stood for workers' rights. And if you look at the platforms that he talks about every single day, minimum wage and more access and protecting workers and these trade deals that send our jobs overseas. Like, this is the one person who would be absolutely perfect. And if the Biden administration and the people around him want to take a lot of progressive rocks out of their hand who want to throw them at this administration, make Bernie Sanders your labor secretary. Not only do you get somebody who truly believes in what the mission of that secretary is, but has a lifelong dedication and history fighting for the working men and women of this country who don't want to be the secretary so he can be on some speaking tour, but wants to be the secretary so he can literally fight for people's rights.
Chuck, really quick, you have such knowledge in this area coming up through the union movement as you did. What can a labor secretary actually do? What difference does it make?
Oh, my God. So first thing is the NLRB and making sure that there's some fairness in contract negotiations when you're doing this piece. He can also make sure that there are safety regulations there for people that are getting stepped on. At every turn, there's laws that are not being enforced in America right now around collective bargaining. And he could be a big advocate and change millions of people's lives by making their workplace better, whether it's safety, whether it's wages, or whether it's collective bargaining. He would play a huge role in wages in America.
So, Marshall, here's the real question, which is that would it make sense for Joe Biden, his agenda, and the coalition that he ran on in order to make Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or those types of people in his cabinet and his administration in terms of the governing agenda that will work best for the people who elected him? What do you think?
Yeah, so there's three different levels that we should, actually I won't even say three. There's a couple of different levels that we have to talk about this, which is number one, the Senate picture. If the polls have been correct and Joe Biden had overwhelmingly run the presidency and you'd also had the Senate pickup, that'd be an entirely different debate. But the problem for Democrats, and this is sort of what people are sort of saying is probably going to sort of ruin Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders' chances, regardless of your ideology, is the fact that Mitch McConnell, controls the Senate right now. And let's be real for a second. I probably bet Republicans are going to win the Georgia runoffs, given the dynamics that Chuck spoke of in the past panel. So what you're going to sort of see is a situation where Democrats just can't afford to put Senate seats at risk. In Massachusetts with Elizabeth Warren and in Vermont with Bernie Sanders, you actually have Republican governors. And I know the Republican governor of Vermont has promised to appoint an independent, but who wants to leave things up to chance at this point? So that's the political level. The second level, which is sort of the Biden ideological level, I'm not quite sure how much sense it makes to make a symbolic move such as that, given sort of the precarious nature of the coalition he has, given the fact that it is highly probable that Republicans could make serious dents and maybe even take back the House in 2022, given the fact that the Senate picture doesn't look that great for Democrats. It's unclear what Biden would get from that other than a symbolic victory. And then finally, for Bernie himself, I wouldn't think this would actually make that much sense, because I get the point about the NROB and all these sort of like very important technocratic things that have to be done. I'm not saying technocratic in a pejorative way, but those are things that basically anyone left of center could sort of accomplish. You don't need Bernie Sanders to do that. And frankly, I'm skeptical if Bernie Sanders' sort of temperament and experience is well suited for being a play by the rules sort of member of the administration, which is just going to sort of muzzle him. If I were Bernie, I would want to stay in the Senate where these fights are going to be had, where you're already sort of seeing these moderate House Democrats in the more rural parts of the country battling with the more left people. And that's where Bernie's voice would matter more.
Yeah.
So, Chuck, the argument I've seen from progressives, Justice Dems, and Sunrise are making this, which is accurate, is basically like, look, young people to a large extent gave you your victory. They turned out in larger margins. This was the age group in which Biden expanded his margins most over what Hillary Clinton performed back in 2016. They showed up in large numbers. So it's like, look, we helped you get here. Now you got to give us something. But the flip of that is he didn't give them anything. He intentionally sort of said, screw you to the left and the young grassroots base of the party, and they still voted for him. So where do you think that the power comes from for groups like Justice Dems, for groups like Sunrise, for other activist progressive organizations in the grassroots base to try to get the Biden administration, given the constraints, to be as progressive as possible and make as much change as possible? Because as I covered here on the show, we're already seeing a lot of like low expectation setting of like, well, he's going to have a Republican Senate, so what can he do? In fact, through these agencies, through executive actions, through regulatory changes, through enforcement actions, there is a lot that he could do if he so chooses. But where does that impetus, that pressure, and that power come from?
Let me clear up one thing, and I'll answer the power question. You should know, just because every state is different on the way that they appoint somebody who's picked to go into an administration. In Vermont, the governor gets to appoint somebody, and he only serves, or she serves, for 90 days, and there must be a special election. I feel pretty good that folks in Vermont will elect somebody progressive to replace Bernie Sanders in 90 days if he were to become the Secretary of Labor. To your point about power, progressives don't realize that they literally have more power right now than they have ever had in the history of the progressive or the liberal movement. And let me explain. Every congressional seat in America is going to change because of redistricting. And because of that, you're going to have people running in districts that they're not accustomed to running in. And so what you see there is folks that are going to be worried about who's going to run against me. And this also opens up opportunities where they can be primaried from the left. Not saying you're going to go out and primary a bunch of good Democrats. I'm just saying this is a point of pressure that you could put on House members that they will never feel before. There's a bunch of Democrats who almost lost their elections, who in a year and a half, 2 years, are going to be running in new districts. You have this groundswell of activity on the ground from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and all the stuff that happened. There's an opportunity there to let your power really be shown out because of what's going to happen in this congressional district after redistricting.
Yeah, really interesting, guys.
That is a very interesting point. Guys, so great to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Coming up, where does the Republican Party go from here? Senior politics reporter from Vox, Jane Cosin. She's going to give us a post-election post-mortem of the right. That's when Rising continues.